Well, I want to welcome you to this edition of our podcast, and this lesson is about converting your primary resources, and we're talking about the third primary resource. Nobody begins with this one. You begin with labor. When you follow labor with wisdom, it is very possible that you will create a product. That's the third primary resource. Now, you may or may not, but product can be an incredible primary resource. Now, there are times when you don't have the time in your regular work week to create product. This is something you may have to do in your spare time. This is something that I learned by observation years ago, and I'm going to read it to you. It's Exodus chapter 20 and verse 9. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. God is telling us in this time that while we're here on the earth, that we have the equivalent of a 6-day work week. Now, I'm not saying that you need to work 8 hours every Saturday. I want you to hear me out. I want you to consider what is called a 6th-day project. Now, I learned this by watching a businessman. My first teaching about money was about believing God. You believe God, you claim a certain amount of money, and you pray, and the money comes in. I had mixed experiences with that. But when I got around this man a few years into my walk with God, about 6 years in, he was a businessman who supported our church. And in the beginning, we didn't have any offices, so he allowed us to use his business as a place to work from. I couldn't help but be around him and observe him. Never one time did I hear him say, I am believing God for X number of dollars. Now, the people I had come from, they said that all the time, but not this guy. I never heard him say that. This man was a hustler, and he was busy all the time. He was not necessarily the guy who did all of the work, but he's the guy who operated his company with wisdom. One of the things that I saw that he never quit at 5 o'clock. I won't say that he worked till 7, 8 at night because he didn't. He spent proper time with his family. But this man spent time after all of his other responsibilities were over. He spent time thinking about his business. He was an encyclopedia of knowledge about where all kinds of truck parts, equipment, motors, wheels, tires, he knew where to get everything. And he knew where people had things for sale. And because people knew that he had all of this knowledge, he was constantly being called for input. What about this? Where can I get these things? He'd say, let me check. He would hang up the phone, call another person, and say, can I give you X amount of dollars for this set of axles that you have? The man would say, yes. He said, I'll be over there to pick them up. He would then make arrangements to deliver the axles to the first man at a healthy profit. He didn't have to warehouse or keep inventory of all of these different things. That was something he kept in his mind, and it was something that he did as a service. Nobody ever thought of him being a cheat because he wasn't. His value was he was a resource. He knew where everything was, and people who were in need were willing to pay him because they needed it in a short period of time. He made it his business to know where everything was. Now, there was no way that he could get all of that done in a 40-hour work week. And I saw this. This man is working the equivalent of a 6th day. I call this the 6th day project. You know, when you work only 5 days, you will get ahead, or break even rather. That's pretty much what happens. It takes you 5 days just to break even, to pay your bills, to pay your obligations. I found out for myself that when I was getting ahead, it was because I was putting in extra time. It was that 6th day that put me over the top. Now, I didn't do it every week, working a full 6 days, But what I would do is I would work a couple of hours every single night. My kids were young. When they went to bed, my wife was also early about going to bed. I would stay up and write. I would stay up and do research. I would stay up and read. I had a kids' magazine. I would stay up and write magazine articles. I would stay up and write episodes of the Gospel Bill Show. Can I tell you, in the 250 episodes of Gospel Bill that I created over the years, from 1982 to 1992 or 3, in about a 10-year stretch, I don't know that I ever wrote a single episode in my office. I believe that I wrote every one of those episodes at night in my home after everybody was asleep, and I would sit down and think through what we needed to get across, and that's when I would create without any distractions, nobody calling me, nobody bothering me. That's when I wrote those episodes. I was doing the equivalent of a 6-day project. I watched my wife do the same thing. She would wallpaper after the kids had gone to bed. She would paint a bedroom. She would do fix-up things in our home, and that's why we always made money when we sold our homes. It was a 6-day project. My son-in-law came to me years later, and he said, "I've heard you preach on this 6-day project," and I began to think about it. He said, "I want to build a house." I said, "I've not known you to be a carpenter." And he said, "Well, I haven't said anything." And my son-in-law is very quiet. He doesn't talk a lot. He said, "For the last year, I've been studying home building. And there's a man I work with in the warehouse. He's actually a man that I supervise. He and his wife build one home every year. And he is the general contractor. He's not building them as fast, nor is he building them as cheaply as everybody else. But he takes the time to deal with subcontractors before he goes to work, after he gets off work. He uses his lunch hour to make phone calls. But he constantly supervises the building of a house in a neighborhood. In the beginning, he borrowed the money to start these projects from the bank. But after a few of these sales, he had enough money put back that he could use his own money to fund what he needed. That's when he really began to make good money. So every year he makes an extra $20,000 or $30,000 to add to his income just by building one home. That's all he wants to do. He said, "I think I can do this." And so he let me know he was going to do it. My first thought was to discourage him, but I thought, no, I'm glad nobody threw a bucket of cold water on my dreams when I first started, because no one had done anything quite like what I did in the beginning either. So he began to build this house, and at the end of the process, he had a home that he could move into. He was the bank's customer, and the bank was willing to loan him the money because they had a guaranteed buyer. So he moved into the house. Not long after that, he started building a second house. And the second house was in the neighborhood that he'd built his home in. It was still being developed. He bought a lot. Bank saw what he had done on his house. They saw that he could get it done. And all the while, he worked for me and never shirked any responsibilities, never took advantage of us. He did everything on his own time. And he built the second house. He put it on the market. In less than a week, he had 2 people who wanted the house. They actually began to get into a bidding war over it. And so one of them made the statement, "We like this house, but we really wish we had one just a little bigger." He said, "Come take a look at mine." So they came down, looked at his home, which was similar, but just a little bigger. They said, "We like your house even better." He sold both the spec house and his own home on the same day, closed on both. Now he moved into a condo and started building other houses in a neighborhood. Wasn't long after this, he came to me and said, "I'm so busy that I don't have time to do my work anymore, and I believe it's time for me to step out and launch my own company." But he did all of this on the 6th day, or in other words, after he had made his obligations toward his regular job and regular work week. So what does a good 6-day project look like? Let me give you 5 things that can help you to spot it. Number 1, it ought to be something that you truly enjoy doing. You don't want to get into something extra that you absolutely hate. One pastor came to my ranch to a retreat that we did, and he said, I've heard of this 6-day project before. I call it a side hustle. He said, I've got one. I said, what is it? He said, I go and buy Star Wars action figures. He is the number 1 expert in America on the value of Star Wars action figures in the package, never opened. And he started with $30. That's what he started with. And today his collection is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I think he told me that he was about to sell a big part of it, but was going to keep it going because he enjoyed doing it. So it's something that you enjoy. Number 2, don't compromise your family time to do it. I did what I did after my kids went to bed. One of the things I loved doing when we started doing the Westerns at Dry Gulch, USA, our town, our camp, didn't look like an authentic Old West town. So I had to go build architectural pieces that at the time you could not buy from anywhere. And I copied them from antique architectural things that I saw in Old West towns that were still extant in Colorado or Arizona, New Mexico. And I would build these in my garage after everybody in my house went to bed. And that was an up arrow for me. I loved doing that kind of work, but I didn't compromise my family time to do it. Number 3, it should never cost you more than what it nets. I had a friend of mine who got involved in producing children's curriculum and other things, and he came to me after doing this for quite some time, and he said, Willie, my expenses are so great. I've had to rent a building, pay staff, and he said, at the end of the day, I don't make any money. He said, back when I first started doing this and I was operating out of my garage and having a part-time person come over and help me ship, he said, I made lots of money, but I don't make any money anymore. That's because his overhead became too great for the take that he was making. And so I suggested go back to a simpler form and cut your expenses. When you are serving the beast, when the beast is demanding all of your time and you're not making any money, it's not from God. God gave you this to bless you financially. If it's not blessing you financially, it's not a good 6-day project. Number 4, it should never threaten your day job. My son-in-law, when he built the house, never one time did anything to threaten the quality of his work for my ministry. He did a great job, but he took his extra time getting the house built. And then, number 5, it should be a natural part of your skill set. In other words, whatever it is you do is something that you can be trained in, that you like, that you enjoy, that you have familiarity with. Now, some years ago, I had several guests at my ranch, and one was a young man who came to me and said, I'm a successful businessman, and he said, I want to do a video game for kids to teach them the Word of God. What do you think about it? I believe God has spoken to me. And I said, well, the first thing I will tell you is I'm not qualified to answer you because you just told me that God spoke to you. Who am I to tell God what He is doing, what He isn't doing, what He wants to bless or doesn't want to bless? So you've put me in a very tough position by coming to me saying, God told me to do this. What do you think? If anyone comes to you, I would suggest that you answer them the same way. Who am I to pass judgment on what God has said? And then the guy backed off and said, okay, I understand that. I see what I did. I will ask you your advice. I said, I got 2 questions. I said, number 1, do you have any experience in working with kids? Is this something that you've done? He said, none whatsoever. Okay. Number 2, do you have any experience in creating video games? And he said, none whatsoever. Then I said, my advice is don't do this. This is not in your wheelhouse. Now, if it is to be in your wheelhouse, then go learn it. And if it's something you're supposed to learn, you can learn it, enjoy it, and then when you develop a skill for it, it may be something that you can do. But I wouldn't jump off and do it just because you feel like somebody ought to do it. Listen to me. You can't do anything well just because you say somebody has to do this. Yeah, it could be that somebody has to do what it is that you're going to do. but it shouldn't be you doing it if you don't have the aptitude and the experience. David was able to sling a stone into the forehead of Goliath because he had been slinging stones. He was able to do what he did because it was in his wheelhouse. That's how you know you have a good 6-day project. It's all the time that I have for now, but I hope you'll join me tomorrow because we're not done talking about converting your primary resources. I want to thank you for watching our podcast today. And if you really liked it, would you please give us a little thumbs up by clicking on that sign down below? And then I would encourage you to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our future podcasts because they're all going to be good. And if you would like to support us financially, either with a one-time gift or recurring gift, you can do that by clicking on the link below or going to myfaithroots.com. Thank you so much for watching this program.